What is up, and welcome back to Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. As always, I am your host, Brandon Silvers, going to look back at all the happy NBA memories we've made this past season. Thank you for being here. Hope you have had a great week. Let's get into it. Okay, it feels like we're ending the NBA season on a negative note, and that's typically the case for fans of every team except the champion, but it just feels like everyone has been angrier this season than we usually are. For example, Luka's angry at the refs. We're angry at Luka for being angry at the refs and for his worst crime of all, not beating the Celtics. We're all mad at ESPN for their poor finals coverage, and we're angry at the league and David Zaslav for not figuring out how to save inside the NBA on TNT. And on top of all that, we just lost NBA legends Bill Walton and Jerry West. It's really been a rough month or so, and it's kind of tainted the entire season. So while I fully intend to return to my hater ways at some point soon, I do want to take a second to stop and appreciate the good things that happened this NBA season. Let's start with the official end of the super team era. Now, I've made the case before that the super team era was a mirage. They only won titles when they featured a top three at worst player in the league. You couldn't just throw a bunch of second-tier stars together and expect to win, especially without considering roles, fit, and chemistry. The final nail in the coffin was this season's Phoenix Suns, who traded for Bradley Beal last offseason. They put him alongside KD and Devin Booker. Great players, but neither is a top three talent in the NBA at this point. And what happened? It never came together and ended in an embarrassing first-round sweep. What's worse for them is now they're stuck. I don't think their next first round draft pick is until well after we've all died a climate change related death. If they want to move on, Beal, who's their third best player, reportedly has a no trade clause. Durant, who is now 1 for 3 trying this super team thing, is still good, but how much are you getting in return for a guy who's about to turn 36 and would be making more than $50 million a year for the next 2 seasons? Booker could get you the best return, but he's probably their best player at this point and still has a couple of years left in his prime. And as great as he is, he's only played 70 plus games 3 times in his 9 seasons and 0 times since the pandemic. They are cooked unless a miracle happens. On the flip side, look at the teams that had success this year. The Minnesota Timberwolves were the team that swept Phoenix. They've got 4 key guys in Anthony Edwards, Cat, Jaden McDaniels, and Naz Reid, who have only played for the Wolves. The guys they've brought in, like Rudy Gobert and Mike Conley Jr., fill specific, much-needed roles for them. They have a clear hierarchy when it comes to their offense. Their most important players are all under 30, and barring injury, they should be contenders for the foreseeable future. Same deal with the Oklahoma City Thunder. They started stacking assets because the Clippers wanted to build their own super team a couple years ago. In that Paul George trade, they got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who had just finished his rookie season and has now developed into an MVP candidate. They also got the draft pick that they used to select Jalen Williams in 2022. He doesn't get anywhere near the noise he deserves. He either had the best or second best season of all the second-year players in the league this past season, depending on how you value Paolo Banchero. He put up 19 points, 4.5 assists, and 4 rebounds, all while shooting 54% from the field and 43% from 3. Oh, by the way, they also had the second best rookie this past season in Chet Holmgren, and another guy they drafted and developed, Lou Dort, had a career year from 3 while also being a lockdown perimeter defender. They are a post presence away from being a championship team. They have the 12th pick in this year's draft despite finishing with the best record in the Western Conference. And the oldest player of all the ones I just talked about is SGA at 25 years old. As much as it pains me to admit it, the Boston Celtics also apply here. It's taken a while, but let's be real. This is how it has typically gone for most NBA championship teams. They drafted Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum back-to-back years at number 3 and went all in on building around them. They did toy with the idea of adding a third star. I remember when they were in the middle of the AD rumors before he went to the Lakers, and actually did add one in Kyrie, but as soon as they saw that wasn't working out, they let him walk. And even that was a low-risk move because they traded Isaiah Thomas to get him in the first place, and Kyrie was way better than him at that point. We won't talk about the role the Celtics medical staff played in that. But they've built around these two guys and remained patient. Instead of blowing things up when they kept knocking on the door but falling short, they would make smaller moves to get better. Things like moving on from Marcus Smart to bring in Kristaps and get Derek White more playing time, or taking advantage of the biggest move last offseason, the Dame trade to acquire Drew Holiday, or something as small as investing and researching in the technology used to make Al Horford's mouthpieces so big. All these little moves while going through the growing pains that come with learning how to win. Even sticking with Joe Mazzulla, who was way over his head at times in his first season. Compare that with how Milwaukee handled Adrian Griffin. First sign of trouble, and here comes Lawrence Fishburne. And look how it's paying off for them. It's a similar blueprint to the one Denver used to win it all last season. It's the formula most championship teams have used. So hopefully we never use the term super team ever again and can just call it what it really is: short-sighted and desperate. Moving on, ESPN's NBA Countdown accidentally covered basketball and spoke with Commissioner Adam Silver. The big quote that's made the rounds is his response to Michael Wilbon about what can be done to fix the All-Star game, and Adam was like, well, we may be past the point of being able to fix it. If you've listened to me, you know I gave up on that a long time ago. The guys just don't see the value in competing in it. I hate it, but it is what it is. However, Adam did figure out a way to get them to play hard early in the season when they typically wouldn't, with the in-season tournament. Remember how much fun that was? It took a little bit to understand how it all worked and why they didn't come up with a better name for it, but once you started paying attention, it was awesome. First of all, since point differential mattered, teams were trying to run up the score on each other. None of that dribble out the clock bullshit or getting mad because someone hit a layup with 8 seconds left. No, there were 48 full minutes of basketball. It also introduced us to stars that we otherwise wouldn't have known about because TV time was going to teams who advanced instead of who would get the best ratings. There was early Tyrese Halliburton MVP talk. Clearly that all fell apart, but in the moment it was something, and it also created that rivalry between the Pacers and the Bucks that led to one of the most ridiculous moments of the season where Giannis was stomping around looking for a basketball. We don't get that if Tyrese doesn't hit a clutch shot against the Bucks in the tournament and hit the Dame time celebration on TNT for everyone to see. It also gave fans of certain teams hope. I spent all offseason shitting on the Lakers because they didn't make any significant moves. Then boom, all my worries were put to rest when they won the first ever in-season tournament championship. Turns out they were on the right track all along. Obviously, the lie detector determined that was a lie, but it didn't matter in that moment because I needed it. It's hard being delusional sometimes. Hang the banner. I love basketball. It's my favorite sport by far, but it's hard to get locked in when the season starts because the season's long and you have college football and the NFL going on at the same time when it's just getting rolling. The in-season tournament was able to cut through that noise and give me a reason to prioritize the NBA at a time when I would have been paying attention, but not nearly as closely as I did. I'd much rather Adam forget about the All-Star game, hell, All-Star weekend altogether, and focus on keeping the in-season tournament exciting and competitive. While you won't have the high-level talent that you'd see in an All-Star game, the fact that the players are trying harder more than makes up for it. Making the regular season feel like it matters again is way more important to the average fan. Speaking of that, I also want to shout out the 65-game minimum for major awards rule. Whether or not that got guys to play more games, we'll never truly know, but it's one hell of a coincidence to see guys playing more games than they have in years all of a sudden. It's a pretty common sense rule to me. It's harder to maintain a high level of play over more games. Players who do that should be rewarded. If you get injured and are unable to, it's unfortunate, but you shouldn't win an award. Look at all the injuries that happened in the playoffs. It was terrible, but nobody was like, hey, the Knicks looked like the best team when they were healthy, so let's give them the title, because that would be silly. Fans, online especially, have gotten louder and angrier and more disrespectful for sure, but I still truly believe that the average real-life NBA fan just wants to see their favorite players hoop and hoop hard. I mean, I certainly do, so I'm all for whatever the league does that can help make that happen. Speaking of hooping and hooping hard, another great thing about this NBA season is the emergence of new stars. Coverage of the league has been dominated by LeBron forever now, and I get it, he's one of the best to ever do it, but the fact that he's been the focus of so much of the coverage for so long and what that coverage has consisted of has hurt the league overall, in my opinion. This actually goes back to what happened when MJ was in the league. All MJ all the time, then he retires and nobody knows how to cover the league other than to look for the next MJ. Well, that was the only Michael Jordan, and he's somewhere drinking tequila and smoking a cigar with the yellowest eyes you've ever seen, so we should move on. By covering the league through this Michael Jordan lens, you're not marketing it to its fullest. Don't get me wrong, comparisons are fine and fun sometimes, but it shouldn't be your only lens. But it was, which led to how the league has marketed itself and been covered during the LeBron era. It's almost like we can't talk about players if they don't compare to Michael Jordan, and since LeBron is the only one who does, he gets the bulk of the coverage even though his play hasn't really warranted that since the bubble. Other guys have had moments. Steph probably had the longest one, but also KD for a short time. Jokic doesn't really seem to want it, so whatever. But we've been stuck with LeBron coverage for the longest time, basically repeating the mistakes we saw with the Jordan coverage. Now, through a number of different factors, we're seeing coverage expand just a bit. Not a ton. We still have to hear who he wants as coach, where Bronny is getting drafted and all that, but a little bit. I think one reason for that is the Lakers have stunk. You have to talk about something in the playoffs, so let's look at the other guys. And Anthony Edwards probably benefited the most from this expansion of coverage in the postseason. Young, very good player, plays an exciting style, zero media training yet, so a quote machine, the perfect recipe for someone who can help carry the league as we move into a post-LeBron era. The Knicks being good again helped get some of that limelight for Jalen Brunson. You've got a guy in a major media market, a city that loves basketball, and he's helping them win for the first time in forever. We also got some of that Tyrese Halliburton hype that I just talked about. I don't think a guy on his level, especially one playing for the Pacers, gets that kind of buzz a couple of years ago, especially without a huge playoff performance to back it up. But again, the in-season tournament, which ended with the Pacers losing to LeBron and the Lakers, was kind of a cheat code for him. The biggest, literally and figuratively speaking, star in the making is Victor Wembanyama. This kind of followed the MJ to LeBron arc in that Vic was billed as the best prospect since LeBron James, and we've seen those prospects before. I just told y'all last episode that Jabari Parker was one at one point, and he was one of many and far from the least accomplished. Well, Vic took all that hype and somehow managed to live up to it. I was skeptical myself at first. How can a guy that skinny succeed? Is he going to get hurt? It took about a week and a half before I was as sold on him as everyone else. He's must-see TV. He doesn't look entirely human. Other players don't always know what to make of him. Everyone is worried about getting their shot blocked and can't judge how much space they really need to get their shot off. He's an absolute game changer defensively. And on offense, he looked better and better as the season went on. He hit 32.5% of his threes, which isn't bad for a rookie or someone who's 7'4", but that was weighed down by a rough start to the season where he was under 28% for the first month or so. Eventually, the percentage started catching up to how the form looks. He's a good playmaker, obviously a lob threat. I'd like to see him operate closer to the basket a little bit more, but I think that'll come as he gets stronger and more used to the physicality. Most importantly, in terms of coverage, he's got a great personality. He certainly had more media training than Ant, but he still seems like a genuine kid who's competitive and loves to hoop. You even see it on the court. This isn't Tim Duncan. He'll flex every now and then. It's awesome to see some of these other players start to move into the spotlight as we try to imagine what NBA coverage looks like post-LeBron. It makes you wonder who's going to be next. If we can all move past the collective trauma of the What a Pro Wants commercial, I wouldn't be shocked to see SGA covered more. I mean, an MVP candidate for one of the best teams in the league usually is. You figure Brunson can hold on to the spotlight for sure, but what about Halliburton? Can he bounce back from an underwhelming playoff performance where it kind of seemed like the lights were too bright at times? These are things I'm interested in seeing. Who's next? Who's hot now? We can do that while also making space for the legends of the game and everyone else. It seemed like fans were really enjoying getting to know some of these guys, so hopefully people in charge of coverage take notice moving forward and squeeze in some other players here and there in between talking about the inevitability of LeBron and Bronny as teammates. Speaking of coverage, that will do it for mine today. If you need more, check out the show notes for the link to my blog called The Show Notes just this past week. I've written about the 2024 USA Women's Olympic Basketball Team, a little cheat sheet for why we should be excited about them, and a couple of posts about running in a 5K every week in June, which may or may not be an ill-advised decision. This has been another episode of Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. Appreciate you watching, listening, rating, subscribing, reviewing, and sharing. Hope you have a great week, and I will catch you later.